welcome, welcome, welcome. My name is Russ Porteous and I am the host for here at Reality Talks. I am joined by my colleagues Peter Karaglanis and Francis Cosway, and we talk every single week about one episode of The Block, usually the home reveal. And this evening, Pete and Francis, another spicy ending to a very interesting reveal of the kitchen, butler's pantry, which is very common, and laundries. So I'll hand it over to you guys, and I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Well, the big things was kitchen, which is the heart of the home, through the butler's pantry, through the laundry, three of the key wet areas that in any property really is the opportunity to set it apart. What are your thoughts about those aspects of any property, Francis?
They are absolutely, well, kitchens in particular, the space that is likely to make or break the sale. And the butler's pantry was certainly something that featured a lot. And I feel that it's becoming a little bit of an obsession, that people feel that they have to have a butler's pantry. There are really good designs and really good products out there that enable you to have far better products than what I saw on the block today with the two corner pull out almost from the 1980s. There are far better solutions available that mean you don't necessarily need to have a butler's pantry. I think one of the key takeaways tonight for me was the obsession with the butler's pantry sacrificed a really well-designed kitchen, particularly with House 2. And it didn't matter how beautiful the materials were, but we'll get onto that later. They sacrificed a really good size kitchen because they wanted a butler's pantry, and I think that is going to cost them a sale.
If we think in automotive terms, I've got many vehicles, pretty much the utilitarian, but it's like when someone obsesses over a sports car. I need a two-door without ever really driving one. And so they get one that looks great, does everything that you actually want. But what you start missing is the practicality that goes with it. And as I was looking at some of those butler's pantries, aesthetically, I thought they looked great. But it's like getting a sports car or a vehicle that actually doesn't suit your lifestyle. Or, as you mentioned, you've sacrificed form and function in order to have two rooms when it should have been a really well-designed one room. I felt that myself. And it was really interesting, especially Neil Whitaker. He's a bit of an aficionado when it comes to butler's pantry, and time again, he kept, saying that it's an area to hide things. It's not a pseudo kitchen in many other ways.
And he was very open about with House 5 that he said this was how butler's pantry started, and their butler's pantry was very functional, had a lot of shelves, it had a lot of open shelves. It's a functional area, and I remind my clients a lot about that too, that this has to work for you really hard. It's not a showpiece. This is actually where you hide things. So make it work for you rather than having everything looking pristine. Make it function. It's meant to allow your kitchen to be pristine, not the other way around. But they all look beautiful, but number 5 nailed it with the functionality of the design of their butler's pantry. They weren't trying to make it something it wasn't.
Interesting. I've been in a lot of clients' properties, obviously new builds or full renos, and the butler's pantry has as much, electronic features in it as the main kitchen. So I've seen cooktops repeated, I've seen ovens repeated, I've seen full-size double refrigerators in there, and I always ask myself, why do they have this? And then as you've been back to the property a few times, it's never been used. And so they've spent so much money on something that doesn't actually do what it's meant to do.
But what you're describing is really a secondary kitchen. And I think the definition of the butler's pantry is it has a sink in it. So you can actually do bits and pieces there. It's not meant to have a dishwasher and an oven and everything else in there. It's a sink. And if it doesn't have a sink, it's a walk-in pantry. And there's nothing wrong with having a walk-in pantry. But if you've got a sink in there, you can perform a few more things, do a few more things, make it a little bit easier, but it doesn't need to have all the other things. Then it becomes actually a secondary kitchen. Should we get stuck into the houses?
let's start with one.
One.
So, yes. What are you thinking about one?
Well, one of the most surprising things I found is most of these kitchens cost less than the living rooms,
I don't
which I
understand.
found
I couldn't understand.
astounding that they could do a kitchen for 33 grand. And they're using, and I have to correct myself for something that I said last week. And I said that we were talking about sustainability, and I surmised that perhaps there was no focus on sustainability because the sponsors were not sustainability focused. Now, I then realised during the week, and I did know this last week, but it slipped my mind, that Costantino, a major sponsor of the block, and I've actually had conversations about why they did it, because I'm a very, very big supporter of Costantino products because they are highly sustainable. They are leaders in their sustainability, and the Decton product that actually featured in every kitchen today in the kitchens is actually a carbon neutral product. It's not a stone, it's not a reconstituted stone, and it's not a porcelain. So yes, there is a sponsor that is sustainability focused. So I wanted to correct that for people that were listening last week. And Costantino are a sustainability minded company. So everything was Decton tonight. So I couldn't believe, knowing what Decton costs, that all these kitchens cost less than the living rooms.
Well, I was just looking at, the ovens and cooktops, and I don't understand it either.
So I don't know whether it's because the sponsors are then like Kingspan, Costantino. I mean, obviously they're contributing product or whatever it is to allow them to do that. So I don't actually know what their money is paying for. Is it the labour? Is it, their styling or whatever it is? It's not very clear. They don't make that transparent. But anyway, if I could get any of those kitchens for around 30 grand, and that's what's going to be very misleading for people in the market, that, I can get a kitchen that looks like that for 33 grand. I can tell you right now, you won't. There are just far too many items in there that they're luxury kitchens. And that's what Neil said. They're luxury kitchens in a luxury home. They are not something you would get for 33,000 for someone off the street.
Not
We
even.
need to make that clear.
Not even close.
Not even close. Absolutely.
But
So look, Kitchen One, I thought that their biggest issue was the fact that they had their pantry overlooking the garden. And I think this was a really good example of why bother having a pantry when they could have extended the kitchen all the way out to the garden and have the view. And as I think one of the judges said, you could even open it out, and you could have just had a really well designed pantry. With the pull-out things that I was talking about, Hafal, Bloom both do them. They didn't need to do that. They did a butler's pantry for the sake of it, and it looked like a bar in there. There was no functionality there. They had glass shelves. They had a couple of bits and pieces. You're not going to use that as a pantry. I thought it was badly designed in the wrong location, and it wasn't functional.
Yeah, it's the thing that, obviously we're talking about the butler's pantry here. I just felt that people would perceive if we didn't tick off butler's pantry, then the house is less prestigious. And the truth is, I cook every single night of the week. I know how a kitchen works and functions, and I know what I absolutely love about our kitchen, and I know what I absolutely loathe about our kitchen at home. And the key thing for me, if I could tick anything, would be a massive island bench with nothing to interfere.
Yes.
With food preparation.
Yes.
And that for me is really important. A really big cooktop oven, more than 900 mil wide. I was in a house in Brighton the other day. Oh my goodness, this oven they had, it was a gas one. Deserves its own postcode. It was huge, but it was hugely functional. And I'm just looking at some of these places, and I'm going, how much time do some people actually spend in a kitchen? Because as I'm looking around, that natural flow of how you do things wasn't there. One thing I absolutely loved about one was I love the ceilings. I love the Velux, how it was set in the roof. To me, it was really different from anything I'd seen before. And I liked how it made me feel. And when I'm cooking, access to natural light is really important, more than electronic. It's one thing I hate about our kitchen. Sure, we got glass all over the joint, but just even with lighting, it's just nice to have natural light. It feels different.
Yeah, I agree with you that it looked beautiful. It had, I think the feeling in there was calm, and I think their whole house, the entire aura of their home is calm. It's a very soft color palette. It's muted tones, soft curves have been used throughout, and from that perspective, they have got such a good eye. But they really missed out on the functionality of this kitchen, and having the sink in the island. This is one of the biggest things I have conversations with clients. We will always avoid having any appliance in the sink. Probably to what you've just said now, Peter, is because you want to have as much lateral space as you can, because we might become a pastry enthusiastic about pastry, and you want to roll it all out, or you can use it as a buffet. So when you have people over, you've got all the crockery at one end, and they just, it's a big buffet of food and everything. They just help themselves. So having an island bench without anything in it is just so worth its weight in gold, and we will go to such great measures to try and avoid having it in. Obviously, we're a very, very compact kitchen. It's sometimes it's not avoidable, but if we can, absolutely. That lateral space can be used for so many different things. So most of the kitchens tonight missed a trick except for 5, because they were the only one that didn't have an appliance in their island bench.
We've got photos at one of our houses that was in Bayswater, and we didn't design or build this; it was already there, but it had a really massive island, and you could actually turn from the wall oven that was set at waist height, pull it out, turn around, and put it straight on the island bench. So when we entertain big. You got Greek family, Irish family. That day we were entertaining, we did use the island as a buffet. We had 78 people at our house. And so
it means people can go all the way around as well.
Well, so when they designed the kitchen areas, you could actually flow in one door and out the other. And so as you went around to the kitchen area, there was utensils and things on the other side. And whoever designed it just actually understood how people move. It was just sensational. And I'm just looking at that tonight going, is it there? So we have a comment by Albright Agent, which we're so happy to have you on here, mate. It says there wasn't a big focus on PowerPoints this year. Oh, mate, let me tell you.
Shana missed a trick.
Yeah. Either each team nailed it or the judges forgot. Nothing more frustrating than the lack of PowerPoints or misplaced PowerPoints. Now, I'm a really big nutter for that. So when we ever do a place in the kitchen in a couple areas, not only do we have PowerPoints, but I absolutely love them with USB and USB ports. You can spend enough time in there. You want to charge your phone or your electronic bits. The other thing that's really important, if you're in enough homes, a lot of people use iPads or those pesky Samsung products as
nice dig, Peter.
To have the menus for the things they're cooking, so it's super practical. And so
we actually have them underneath the island, and I noticed in-house too, on their magnificent tiles that wrapped around, they had a charcoal PowerPoint on the front of the island. I could not believe it. So we mount them rebaited in the underside of the bench top on both ends of the island bench, so that kids can do their homework, the recipes, more appliances come out, and you've always got power, rather than having the PowerPoints on the side.
That's a funny thing. I actually built the desk I've got here. It's about 2 and a bit meters long, and the power is actually rebaited underneath.
Yeah, that's exactly what we do with the island bench.
Yeah, and I like things tucked away. So if we do stuff, we'll actually have little channels you can actually feed things through, and it doesn't drop down, because I hate droopy. That's just my little thing.
Bugbear.
So what do we think of the laundry in one?
Oh, look, that was such a flash in the pan. I actually just saw the colours and that was it, because I was taking all my notes about the kitchen and it was like, whoa, and we're gone. So I only saw a slight flash of it.
Yeah, they actually didn't spend a lot of time on it, which I was actually surprised. It was almost a cursory comment. So if we go from there, house to Leah and Ash, you mentioned them before, she changed the size of her island during the week because it was too big. At the last minute, that's a major change.
If kitchens sell houses, they're not going to sell this house. It is such a tiny kitchen, such a tiny island bench. I'd say it wouldn't have even been 2 meters, maybe at a push, with a sink almost centered, so you didn't have any lateral space. And it's a family home, and this is a multi-million-dollar property. I reckon it'll cost them severely. And yet the pantry was big.
Yep.
And I thought if they had got rid of the pantry again, they could have had such a good island bench, and it was in a good location in the space. It wasn't very wide as it was. They kept raving on about the materials. Yes, the bench top was beautiful. The tiles around the front were exquisite. Big faux pas with the charcoal PowerPoint. They have done this in every room. They've got let's highlight our charcoal PowerPoints. They did it in the living room. They've done it everywhere. I think they had too many materials. They had 4 colours and textures going on. I thought it was too many. I'm more of a work off the principle of less is more. I thought there was too much going on. Too many shapes, too many textures, too many colours.
Well, their wine pantry was pretty well sorted. And I've just thought to myself, if anyone got on the terps a little bit with all those different colours, it would just exacerbate the hangover. Don't know where.
But yet the judges loved it. The judges thought the colours were great, and I'm like, that stuff above the cooker, I was like, it just, I don't know, it was cool. They had warm with cool. I just didn't think it worked at all.
I think as I was looking at it, so I looked at it at the whole, and I go, I can see what they were trying to do.
Yes.
A lot of the things work really well in isolation. So
yes.
if that island and the tiles, which I thought they were quite delicious, the tiles.
Beautiful.
If that was on its own and the kitchen was doing something else, I go, that's awesome. But then when I looked at the kitchen alone without the island, I go, I can see what they were doing here. And so, 4 different colours. The max I ever have in a place is 3. And the
I was just about to put my fingers up, 3.
So one thing about my business, I always deal in 3s. The brain picks up odd numbers, not even numbers. There's some psychology for you, which it's not for tonight, but there is a reason we do it. But even with shading a property, so people talk about neutral tones, and we've talked about that when we're preparing for sale. However, with the neutral tones, we have variations of. So the eye and the brain picks up, there's depth and width, and we want in some areas a little warmer, in some areas a little cooler. And we do it so that there's the sense of moving through a home. It's not just, it's not just the one thing. But when you're starting to get to 4, I honestly didn't know where I was looking. And so it makes me really picky. But, they're selling the home. This is a competition.
Correct. And I cannot believe that she just made so much emphasis and kept raving on about this pink coffee machine. It's like, that is not going to sell your house, sweetheart.
No.
And congratulations that you went and got yourself a pink coffee machine. But this is not about the design of a kitchen. This is an accessory.
Actually, I'm glad you picked that up, because when we get to house 5, we've got 2 key things that stand out, or 3 key things, and my thoughts on them are completely different and for different reasons. But but
this is an accessory, which is going to be different to house 5. So that's not going to sell it.
For the coffee machine, sure, it's a little bit of bling. It's like putting on a coloured globe. It stands out.
Yeah,
but
it was just
often bubble.
Fantastic. Like,
B-Rod agent said, I bet the judges won't bid on the house though.
I absolutely agree with you, because I think that Leah and Ash's house is far too polarizing. Look, we will get to house 5, but I really think that there's too many rooms in their home that are polarizing, and the bad design of the kitchen, I think, is going to be a deal breaker for them. But what about the laundry? If that's not a deal breaker, I don't know what is. Walking through a bathroom to get to an absolutely tiny laundry for a family property. Russ, yes, he's got a big view on this. I think that's going to be a deal breaker. Laundries are becoming more and more of a thing. It's not just this utility space anymore. People are taking more pride in what their laundries look like. They're adding stone into the bench tops and so forth. But they need to be a space where you can dry your clothes, where you can store your dirty clothes. I think people forget what a laundry's meant to do. And
I'll tell you
so
what a laundry's for. It's for hiding all the stuff when you have visitors over. You need
that's
space.
right. That's
Yep.
exactly right, Russ. But these laundries don't even function as a laundry. But this one in particular, going through a bathroom, what a deal breaker.
Well,
I
actually,
can't imagine that someone is going to be with a family or thinking of having a family is going to be interested in a kitchen that small and a laundry that small in the location that it is. I think they've messed up big time.
so
Floor plan.
I went back to my notes. I think it was week 2 when that came up about the laundry
Yes.
coming to the bathroom. And I remember mentioning to my wife at the time, what are they thinking? It made no sense to me. And I don't know about you, I'm an extremely private person. The last thing I want when I'm in the bathroom or the toilet is a thoroughfare. At all,
Exactly.
in no circumstances, even when I'm home alone and no one else is in the house, I have the door shut.
Yeah.
I'm just
But you're not alone with this, Peter. This privacy thing is really big, and that's why people don't like the powder room close to the living room, because they don't want themselves or their guests to feel uncomfortable. So it's you're not alone with it. This is a deal breaker. I think this will cost them
no,
dearly.
absolutely. And one of the worst things, actually, you mentioned the powder room, aka toilet. My daughter was going to put a toilet into her laundry, and on the other side of the wall is the dining room. And I said, not a chance. And she said, oh, no, look good. I go, so what happens if you're eating baked beans? Who wants to be sitting in
Yeah.
there
Oh
and
no.
the candles blowing out? It's just not good. And I
No.
really disliked it. So house 3, I wrote, the first thing I looked at almost before the comments was white kitchen with white handles. What were they thinking?
I've got bigger problem with the splashback being white than the handles. I think the handles had texture because Neil said, is that a crosshatch? So I actually know the handles he was talking about. I felt that it gave it a seamless look. And I think their objective was to really showcase the island bench, which was beautiful. So I don't have as much of a problem with the handles as I do with the splashback, because it made it feel like that entire wall was sterile. I felt
Yeah.
it was too sterile, but the judges loved it. I just felt like, I don't know, it was too white on white. That was the problem. So they either needed handles with colour or a splashback with colour. And for me, I felt that the splashback needed to have colour to break up the overhead and the below cupboards was more important for me than the handles. You obviously thought the handles are a big issue.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't think the white was ugly, but
No.
in my mind, my first thought is, how will this photo? Because we're selling it.
Too
And
bright.
so handles, quite often what we do with existing kitchens that are physically in good condition, they just look a little bit dated. The very first, most cost-effective thing we do is change all the handles, and we modernize them, and we create a little bit of depth, something to look at. And as I was looking at, my mind is going, how are they going to photo this so people can actually appreciate the space? The other thing with white, and I never ever get away from this, 9.5 out of 10 people do not clean their kitchens thoroughly each time they use it. You give it a wipe over and that, but you touch handles often enough, you touch surfaces, a little bit of oil on your fingers, which is natural, something on cook. And then what happens when the light's in the right place? It just shows up dirty. And the number one place that, if you want to see how clean a kitchen is, I always check the undersides of the handles every single time. Now, we detail kitchens. So we do it forensically, like when we're on site. So we'll upgrade labs and all sorts of things. So things that we do that most people don't see. But the truth is you'll start to get little black marks in and around. So they look ugly. And cleaning fascias of cupboards that are all white or a stark white, they literally show everything. And so for me, yes, it looks nice, but I needed a variation, even if it was a variation or what, just something to add a little bit of depth in there.
Mm.
Something to look at is what was missing. However, I love the cupboards. I like, so we're talking a color palette.
Yeah.
As much as I said about the color palette, I actually really liked cupboards and spaces. I thought it was good.
Yeah, they did have good cupboards. What did you think about the rise and fall splashback? I know every single person that's seen the block now is going to ask me about these rise and fall splashbacks.
Do you remember in the 80s and the early 90s when you had the cupboard doors open up and they just sort of bent around like that? They had the little slats.
Retractable, yeah.
Yeah, and then they just went, they just sort of, and around they go, almost like they look almost like a hinge thing. All right, first time I ever saw them was in New Zealand at my in-laws' place, and I went, wow, that's amazing. I love to have that. And then it became so dated so quickly because it was a trend through. Now, I saw the splashback come up, and I asked myself, how are people going to use it? I will guarantee you, people are going to leave it up or down.
That's right. That's right. It'll be up or down. But the other thing that I felt was really not functional with it was all the shelves in there were glass.
Yes.
Like, tell me that is going to be really functional at where a cooktop is, the fats and everything else, a pain to clean. But then they had a big void above the actual stove. So I thought, so you've got it's meant to be for storage, and yet you've left this massive void there. I didn't understand it at all what they were trying to achieve. And they had it all backlit. And to me, it was a gadget that wasn't functional. And that would have cost a bomb, although, yes, I'm sure Rafael sponsored it. But that's not an expensive piece of hardware. And I just thought it was a gimmick. So Russ, what did you think about it? Oh, we can't hear you.
Russ, audio.
Yeah.
Do you want a rise and fall splashback? Do you think that'd be a really good thing in your kitchen?
Well, it's never going to work in my kitchen. No. At the end of the day, I love the ability to hide something.
Yes.
But I not at the expense of functionality. I just think about houses you're going to get 20, 30 years out of a house before you need a renovation. And this is one of those elements of a house that's probably going to break in 7 years. And then it's going to be a major disaster to fix. And I agree with you with glass. We have a full bar in our house, and it has glass shelves. And we used to have glass shelves in another part of our house, and they're just like magnets for stuff. Doesn't matter how clean your house is, glass is a magnet for stuff.
Yeah. And also because Darren was so, fancy with the push button to make that thing open, because it obviously opens with a remote. So there's another thing that can get lost. I can't find the remote. I can't open the splashback. But the other thing I'm really curious to know, and they didn't talk about it at all, is what is it made of? Because that has to meet regulations. It must be fireproof because it's behind a cooktop. I don't know what it would be made of.
Just correct you on something. We never have fireproof. We have fire resisting.
Okay, fire resisting. Thank you, Russ. Let me get the right terminology.
Yes.
But also it being white, to your point, Peter, being white behind a cooktop, what a nightmare to clean, the fats and everything else on it. So I think you're right, Peter, it'll just be left open. So what's the point of having it?
So one of the key things with different cuisines being cooked, so one of the biggest areas that take a lot of time in prepping a property, I've talked about European cuisine. So I cook a fair bit of Greek food. We have the magnificent Indian cuisines. If you love Indian food, absolutely. Chinese food, love Chinese food. So in cooking, especially high temperature, which they use a lot of oils, it's called flash point. It's that point where the oils aerate and they float off. They carry with them all the herbs and spices. Now, those herbs and spices are coloured. It will go in every little crevice that sits in there. To clean it off is a lot of hard work, and we spend copious amounts of time making it look really good. So, yeah, the gee whiz factor is there. I actually, you know, what we haven't seen and what would impress me is a little step out stool that comes out from underneath the cupboards, so you can actually step on something and reach and put whatever it is in an overhead. You know, that for
Fancy,
me,
Peter, fancy.
absolutely. And I've seen them, and they're just well thought out.
Much better.
Yeah, absolutely. So anyway, look, aesthetically, it was pleasing. It hit all the marks as far as storage. Loved it. The only two key things I would change is, in my opinion, the colour and that little nook is what I'm going to call it, the ubiquitous nook.
Yeah. There's only one thing I thought was really badly designed from a storage perspective, and that is they had two pantries right at the end. So they had a pillar pantry, a tandem on the right-hand side, and then they had one on the left-hand side. How impractical is that? Oh, I need to get all my cooking things. Oh, let me go to this end of the kitchen. Oh, and then I'll just go back to the other end of the kitchen. Now, I know why they did it, because they wanted those to be bookending the design of the kitchen. So that for me was form over function, and it was a big mistake, because you do not want all your food in separate locations.
Oh, it's terrible. And it's a pain.
That was
use.
such a bad, that was totally aesthetic over what it should have been. The butler's pantry, I made a note, was quite practical. What about the laundry?
There's no space. I'm just going, where do we put things?
They couldn't even stand in there. It was so narrow. I think that the passage there was about 800 or 900. It was about the door width. So it would have been 800.
So the first thing,
it was so narrow.
So you open the front, and they were front loaders. You open it up.
Oh.
So which side do you go in? So imagine you're between the washing machine and the dryer. And if you noticed, they went pivot to open opposite ways. So you literally have to open one, shut the door, go around, and open the other one. What they would have been better doing, in my opinion, is not having them side by side, is actually having the same width of them apart. So you could grab one and turn and put it in the other. And so just on a practical sense, I'm going, that's the only way between those two doors you could actually make it work, and then have them open, one on the left, one on the right. So you've actually got space to do it. Or
they could stack them.
Could stack them, yeah, absolutely.
If they're not condenser dryers, but you could stack them. But yeah, and they're not enough. I couldn't believe there was about 30 centimetres worth of bench space in a laundry.
It actually
in a house. That's fine in a unit or an apartment, but that is not suitable for a family home.
It actually, to me, had a much more 1950s utilitarian feel to it, except aesthetically it was a lot more pleasing. But as far as usable space, I'm going, there's nothing here. And I tell you, my wife loves a big laundry. Loves.
So do I.
She had the privilege of coming onto one of the properties we were doing in Mount Eliza. And to this day, and that's been some years ago, she comments on that whole laundry. It was massive. It was super practical. I loved it.
I'm really disappointed in that, storage functional Queen Shana didn't really pick up on the real functionality requirements for the laundry at all. She didn't really they didn't look for broom cupboards. They didn't look for hampers. They didn't look for, drying. It's sort of, I just felt they really missed out. I think the laundry, to be honest, this week, maybe because it was kitchen week as well, was sort of just like a real, poor cousin. It was almost like a tiny add-on. They really didn't go into a lot of detail. So, look, I suppose it was kitchen week.
Yeah, it may have been post-edit.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you edit it out. So our perennially favourite couple.
I know. You know what? She didn't deserve it. Those lights, I'd actually seen them during the week, and I thought, what were you thinking, Steph? You cannot have that much aesthetic form over function in a kitchen. And I think the judges were spot on that it looked spectacular. But it was, she clearly has not designed kitchens in the past, I don't think. You don't have your crockery in the pantry. Shana picked up on all the issues with the storage. She also had bookend storage facilities. Even some of it was so bookend that it didn't even open. She was so focused on the aesthetic. That kitchen wasn't that big, and she had no overhead cabinetry, and yet she wanted 3 beautiful lights. I thought it was a massive fail.
I think Neil Whitaker said it at the end, but I'll say it at the beginning. It's functionally beautifully dysfunctional.
Yes,
Yeah,
and it is.
It was such a. To tell you the truth, I actually didn't like the lights. I
Nor
looked
did
at
I.
those, and to me, it reminded me of a Parisian cafe or something out of 1950s New York. It was, and that space. And the thing is that she said herself that she wants to reimagine functionality, and and she actually did that. Her brief. She knew what her own brief was, but maybe it's because I'm not used to seeing it that way. So there's misgiving there. But seeing 3 lights that actually don't belong above a kitchen, they're going to be great dust collectors, going to collect oil. It was missed, and I suspect that may be, maybe massaged a little differently in coming weeks.
It'll be interesting to see what she does do with that. I think that what she did, though, in terms of changing the layout, changing the location of the kitchen, really worked, because when they did the big pan back and you could see the living with the kitchen, you could see how well that worked, and that she really had the foresight to move it. So it was definitely in the right location. I don't actually understand why she had 2 openings into the pantry. Yes, it's easier access from either end, but I think that she possibly could have then got additional storage in the kitchen itself and made that function better.
Well, if you remember, one of the cupboards didn't open on the right hand
That's
side.
right. That's right.
Because it was being used on the other side of the wall.
I mean, it was crazy, just crazy. What else did I have here? Oh, the smart extraction. Now, I wonder whether that was a borer. I've seen these, the extraction under, and they are unbelievable. And I think if you get the right brand, I have actually I know that Darren sat there and he said, well, if you're cooking a salmon and it's going to spit everywhere, if it's the really good quality ones, they will actually, believe it or not, take the fat and everything, and it won't actually spatter all over the bench. So you could have sat where he was sitting and not had hot oil over you. It still wasn't the right spot for the cooker, and she was better off having it. I think one of the judges mentioned it, and I agreed that the sink and the stovetop should have swapped, and the sink would have been better off in the island bench. But she also had the cabinetry facing the living. I don't really know why you'd want that when you could have had more. She only had 3 stools there. Well, if you've got a family, why would you want 3 stools? You can't even all sit there. So I would have had that all open, because you don't really need that cabinetry facing the living. It wasn't even a dining. But
Was it
3
Steph
stools,
that had
and they were
those?
tight. Sorry,
Were
Russ?
Were they the fluffy white ones?
No,
Oh.
no, not the boucle. No, which was just an absolute, yeah. No, Neil certainly picked up on that. No, that was in house 3, I think.
2. I think it was 2. Lee and Ash.
That was 3. Christy and Brett.
Christy and Brett, yeah.
They had the boucle and the horrendous dining chairs that didn't fit with the table. No, they were quite square stools, Russ, but there was only 3, and they were quite tight together. Darren sat at one. I just couldn't see that working as a family kitchen properly. I felt really bad because it looked so beautiful and the materials were stunning and it all fitted in with everything else. But yeah, it didn't work.
And it'll be a really interesting dynamic. So I thought Darren over-egged the omelette when he actually had to lean right across. Let me stay in shot. Lean right across to where the cooktop was. Now I've seen those cooktops in a bunch of places. You get, even with a good quality one, they actually require extra cleaning because the oils actually sit in and can actually build up, and then it just like an in-house vacuum cleaner, the extraction component, becomes less over time. That's just a minor thing. Last week, when I saw what she was doing, I actually said to my wife before it announced during the week, I go, she's going to use an under oven extractor because I've seen them a number of times. Interestingly, when people walk through, they're not actually going to pick up that there's only 3 chairs there. It's not typically how someone evaluates a property. They'll look at it, they might even sit at it, but you won't have a whole family sitting there at the same time.
No.
So that's something a designer would pick up. Atypically, I have never seen a buyer, unless they're incredibly knowledgeable, aren't going to tend to pick that up and go, oh yeah, this is like a negative thing.
It's not big enough. Yeah.
No, it's not big enough.
And you're probably right on that.
Yeah, I actually think her 3 lights are far more polarizing. And if she's going to have lighting there, it's actually the wrong lighting.
I agree.
The right strip lighting across, a really nice, crisp, minimalist design, to me would have been better. Especially when you've got a bench top, you've got little gaps of light along there. It's incredibly frustrating in a functional place where it's not evenly lit. And especially because I'm just trying to remember the bench top, was it a polished look? Because I can't remember. But one of the other
it was a polished. It was a very light colour.
Yeah, so, refracted light off bench tops, depending on how you're standing, what you're seeing, can actually just bounce up in your face, and it becomes less usable because you can't see properly. And I just felt those 3 lights just really didn't give what should have been there. And
they also didn't meet her Japanese, her overall Japanese aesthetic. It's sort of, I think, you nailed it when you called it, French cafe style. It wasn't a Japanese sort of style. But anyway, look, she got penalised for it because they came last.
Yep.
But she's still a beautiful person because she's still.
I think what she's gleaning is she said, what do we do with that? I'm going to think of the positive. So she's growing. And the one thing I would say about a really well-designed strip light across, it would have framed between those cupboards much better. So even though it was an open space, it would have just... So if you have a look just at the rim, I've not wearing my glasses, but if you see really well-designed glasses, when they come across, that rim across frames the face and leads us to look around. And that's, in my opinion, what should have been there. What do you think of their... I've got to say, I'm going to sort of skip past, their little... no, I'm not going to skip past their butler's pantry. You said you had 2 entrances, one side to another. Do you remember in the early 2000s in say, like in Metricon homes, those really big ones, where you had the master bed and you could walk into the walk-in wardrobes?
Both sides.
Yeah. I looked at that and I've gone, hang on, this is a Metricon bedroom from, circa, 2003.
It's very unusual for a pantry, but that is exactly what it is. Access behind the bed for the walk-in robe.
So I've got to say, laundry, I absolutely love the tiles on the floor.
So did I.
You didn't like it?
It looked beautiful. No, I loved it. I think it looked absolutely beautiful. I didn't think it was as dysfunctional as some of the others.
No, I liked it.
It was much larger than some of the others, and yet Whitaker called it dysfunctional. I thought, well, it's a lot more functional than some of the others that had good bench space.
Now, what he
and they only spent 25 grand.
Not a chance.
Not a chance. There's not a chance. They wouldn't have even paid for the cabinetry. But anyway,
wouldn't have paid.
Should we go to number 5?
Yeah, we're going to go to number 5.
Let's go to 5. Go on, hit me with your orange.
Can I tell you? My first thought was, I thought it was too grey, too much grey on grey on grey at first camera panned in.
It's exactly what I thought.
Yeah. However, in a million years, I wouldn't have imagined the orange. Like, for me, I wouldn't have imagined. And I looked at it and I've gone, oh. So I had this reaction. But the more I looked at it, I don't know if it was because of the colour of the cupboards and the bench tops were just so muted and the same. I've gone, this thing actually stands out like a beacon. And the more I looked at it, it actually gave me a focal point and a reference point for just actually how big that bench top was.
Yeah.
Sorry, the island bench. You could have landed a bowing on that thing. It was
Yeah, it's
huge.
at least 3 meters long, at least.
And
At
depth,
least. Yeah.
so much depth.
So when exactly as you said, when they first panned into it, I said, "Oh, it's so dated, it's so masculine, it's so grey." And my daughter was with me, and she said, "Oh, it's terrible, it's too grey, it's too grey." But I think when they were walking through it, and you got to see the bench top up close as well, it wasn't just a solid block of grey. It was actually it had a mottled effect through it, so it wasn't a block of colour, which was really nice. I don't know why it had to be so thick, though. That is very early 1990s. In fact, 2 of the houses did that 100 mil bench top, which I didn't think was awesome, although it was cantilevered. So you felt the orange worked. You got used to it.
I got used to it, and
Yeah.
I don't know whether I could live with it.
Will it sell?
Sorry?
Will it sell?
In a
Because the
photo?
goal is, will it
Yep.
sell?
I think in a photo, it's going to absolutely pop. And
Yeah.
that's what when I use the term a focal point. So when we're filming, that's that
Yeah.
one thing the eyes are drawn to. And this is what was missing in three different lights. It wasn't a focal point. And so I looked at that, and I looked at the quality of it. And, you know, I kept saying I love cooking. I looked at the extractor, looked at the cooktop and everything. I've gone, that would just be delicious to use. I'd love it.
It was all good quality. I mean, it was all smeg. Whitaker said, "I love orange. I love it." But orange is not a popular colour.
That's not.
If I think about all the colours that I'm asking my clients, what's your favourite colour? Most of them will say not orange.
Yeah.
So I think it's so polarising. If they had have done a blue, a navy blue, or some sort of blue, but even though you don't like it, Russ, blue is probably the most popular colour that we get back to us if we're saying what colour do you like. So they would have been safer with blue, but then would it have had the impact that the orange has had?
I thought that the whole thing was a sales pitch for Smeg, and it didn't fit. It was just a sore thumb in the middle for me. I didn't mind the orange, but the whole thing from the range at the top all the way down, it just didn't fit. It's like, and it was right in the center of attention in the middle of the kitchen, and I like discreet and disappear appliances. Not like
that's not your kitchen, then, Russ.
Give me an induction cooktop at the back in that spot, and I'll be happy.
Induction cooktop. It's like having flat Coke.
It's
warm, but
at least you didn't say decaf.
No.
I don't know. It's going to be really hard to know how people react to this on sale day about the orange. It's not something you can easily change either. That's what I kept thinking. It's not like that Leah's pink coffee machine you can just take off the bench, because I bet you any money it's not plumbed in. I don't know. It's definitely going to photograph nicely. It's definitely going to grab attention. People will want to see it. I do feel that the kitchen is very dated. However, masculine and dated. I feel it's very 90s. However, they nailed the functionality. They were the only ones that had thought about how someone cooks. They had enough storage. They had a butler's pantry. It was actually a pantry, not a butler's pantry. They had a walk-in pantry that was functional. It had a lot of cabinetry and shelves, which is what it should have. They didn't have a door between the kitchen and the pantry. I'm not a fan of that. I think you should, as Shana said, it's a dumping ground. You want to be able to close the door so that you can dump and leave and not let anyone else see the dumping ground. So they nailed the functionality, and I think that's why they won. And it was a good size. Gee, it was a good size.
That's true.
And they can do whatever they want on that island bench. It could be anything.
Oh, totally. Be right, agent. Were you going to mention that?
Yeah, so Be right agent has said, once again, the blockheads are building for the cameras, not the buyer. I disagree.
Yeah,
you tell me why you disagree, Pete.
Because I cook. And for me, that puts front and center what the kitchen is actually designed for. Discreet doesn't do it. Discreet is like it's hidden away. The kitchen, it's utilitarian. It's creative. It's meant to do something. All the great chefs in the world have cooktops that make a statement. They're functional. They're big. They do things. Just discreet. Like,
okay, so I'm going to reread what Be Right Agent said, and then I'll tell you what I'm thinking. Right. Once again, the blockheads are building for the cameras, not the buyer. So I disagree, but I agree.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to reread it as if I was saying it. Once again, the blockheads are building for the advertisers, not the buyer.
Correct. That's exactly right. And that's where I suppose this show is going a bit wrong, because they're going off what people are wanting to watch this show for. But say what else you're going to say, because I know why you want discreet kitchen appliances, because a kitchen is a gathering place for people to come together.
Yep, and my house is always full of people. So I like when people come to my home, they lean over our dysfunctional kitchen and talk and assemble food together and
Correct.
and do stuff. And I'm blessed to have a really big pizza oven outside, so people gather around that. Yeah, so people gather around that. So for the rest of it, I'm happy for discreet. And I like clean, straight lines. I don't like the accumulation of stuff.
And so this, I think, is a really good example of how different people have different objectives for how they want their kitchen to be. And so for some people, having this bright orange, to your point, Peter, it's going to work really well because I want to make cooking the center of what I'm doing in my kitchen. But other people do want it discreet because the kitchen is about coming together. It's the center of the home. It's where people lean over benches and where people gravitate. But it doesn't mean we need to gravitate around the cooking necessarily, depending on how you want your home to or your kitchen to be. So this is why I think it's so critical that kitchens are designed around how people want to use them individually. But of course, they're trying. I think Leah made a big faux pas today. She said, but we don't know who we're designing for.
Yeah.
And I thought, you should know who you're designing for because you should know who your buyer is.
Yeah,
she should have an idea of who her buyer is. I thought, what are you talking about?
You know, anyway. Francis, you and I know each other because of our business relationships. And one of the things we often talk about is our avatar. Who is it? Who is our audience? Who are we trying to reach? And I think that if let's say any of us were as contestants, that would be one of the first things that I'd want to do. I'd want to study the market. I want to understand what's the demographic. What are people looking for? What are the trends that are timeless? And they're the elements of the show that I think people want to see, and we should be looking for, so we can build for that. Not what's this in fashion thing right now, but what does the market want?
I will say about SMEG is like, say, Apple products, like anything that is a market leader or has a perceived high value. SMEG in a kitchen is a statement.
You think?
SMEG in a stick.
No.
You get better ones, but
I don't think SMEG is.
Miele, maybe.
No, well, Miele.
Ilvi.
What's that other team brand that they got that's out there?
Ilvi,
yeah. But
Gagano.
We're talking about in the context of this house, is that's the statement in this home, is that SMEG appliance. So it's big, it's bold, it's brassy. And as people say, for fair income buyers, people who are going to be looking at these homes, right, if you've got the wherewithal, you've also got the wherewithal to change the colour of the SMEG appliance. But it's where it's at.
Yeah. Look, SMEG's not a bad brand. Let me just, I've actually got a SMEG cooktop. I've got that cooktop they've got. It's awesome. But, I do have SMEG, but I wouldn't say it's super high end. But it's definitely not a bad appliance. It's a really good quality German appliance. It's just not your Gagano. It's right. It's right for the market where it is. Gagano is actually not right for the market. Gagano is is too high for where the market. Smeg's perfect for this market.
Yeah, absolutely. Because it's not Brighton. It's
correct. That's exactly right. That's why it's right for this market.
I know we're all pushed for time this evening.
Yes.
So what was your take on the results this week? And I don't remember the gnome winning the gnome. I must have missed an episode somewhere. Might have been while I was in Tasmania. But
there was one you did miss. Yes, it might have been that week actually that they got
the week they did the rap dancing.
No, I think I was in Tasmania for the
Tassie.
week.
Yeah.
So that came as a bit of a surprise to me. And so what did you get if you had the gnome? Like, was it an instant win or something?
No, it's just 1 point.
You just get 1 point.
Is that it?
Yeah.
Yeah. But it's when it's really tight, because it was so tight, that's why they played it.
Like, what blew me away when I looked at the scores was that the girls got 30 points, and the next closest was like 29 and a half. And I'm like, really?
28.
It was 28.
It was actually 28 and a half.
Christy and Brett, 28 and a half.
I still thought that was a long way off what they'd done, what the girls had done. I could be wrong.
Yeah, I think look, you have to tighten it up a little bit. I didn't realise, because I only got to see some of the scores as I was setting this up. So they literally got 3 10s.
They got what? Sorry, Peter.
The girls got 3 10s. Because
that's correct. They got 30.
No.
I don't think.
No, they didn't. They got a 10,
20.
a 9 and a half, and a 10 and a half.
Oh, okay. Well, there you go. I only saw the end scores. So, look, I was happy for the girls. They struggled. Yeah. I think the real story of the week, the real drama that I thought was factual, was the dilemma of, do we keep these builders on?
The builder.
Yeah. Now, I felt for the builders. They're, as I said there, and, the foreman, Dan the foreman, and the other guy said, look, the quality of the build's fantastic, but they needed something more. And I think they came into this thing saying, okay, this is what we do and nothing more. You're going to go onto that show. It's plus, plus, plus. And one of the key things, and I actually made notes of this, as I actually said to Tanya tonight, when I'm working on a property, I'm hand-holding as much as we're actually doing the work. And we're walking people through what's going on. And the key thing is that people have misgivings when they're in the middle of something. We're too far from the shore and we can't see where we're going. And they're not used to being in this bit in between. And what the builders needed to understand is the girls needed a lot of hand-holding. And that's what was missing. The brothers, who are the new builders coming on with their guys, look, time will tell, but I suspect they'll be far more decisive and own that space a whole lot better. And I would say, yeah.
No, you go ahead, Pete.
I think, look, I felt sad for the builders coming off, but they only realised at the very end that they really needed to give more of themselves than they did.
Yeah.
I think in just sort of wrapping up, I think that the girls deserve to win this week. I thought the function of their place was a standout. Maybe we disagree with one little item or a couple little items, but I think they were a standout this week. But the show always finishes with a bit of titillation for the coming week, and I think it's going to be all about Christy and more Christy this week. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with the
Christy,
with the master bathroom next Sunday night. The ensuite for the master bedroom. That would be a better way to phrase it.
Well, I had a little bit of inside goss.
Righto, go.
Yeah. So we were actually on Saturday afternoon. We were down there just having a little look. And
Brett, is that what that photo was?
Yeah, it was.
Okay.
Thanks. Yeah. But I'm not sharing that yet. That's for further episodes. But they were actually, they arrived back in their Ford ute and they were going into the house. They had other things they were going into the house with. So either they're living on site or nearabouts, but they were still in and around the property when no one else was. So I thought that was interesting.
Brett and Christy.
Mm.
Ah.
Yeah, 2:30 Saturday afternoon. I saw them.
Wow.
Yeah. And you know what?
Okay.
I think they made an appearance because they knew we were doing reality bites and they wanted to lift their profile a little bit. Too late, though.
Hey, so you guys had a podcast together during the week, and
We
Terry
did.
decides going to have a little chat with me in the top corner there. You guys did a podcast. How did that go?
We did. It was great. It was great having Peter on the show. We chatted. We tried not to talk more than an hour.
Yeah, good luck with that. They are
'Cause
27. I think
we're
it was.
always so that'll actually go live on Thursday. So
And so
that'll be live
what's
on
the name of
Thursday.
your podcast, Francis?
So the podcast is My Forever Home, and you can grab that wherever you listen to your podcast. So Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts,
Yeah, Apple
wherever. And it's
Podcasts.
also on the web. It's also on the website whitepebbleinteriors.com.au, and it's renovating for your forever home versus renovating for profit. And Peter and I talk about some of the differences and also some of the similarities when you're renovating for your forever home versus when you're renovating for profit, when you're renovating for an investment to make a return.
And just for those people that are watching, your thing is about helping people build or renovate their forever home.
Correct.
And so if people are interested in learning more or contacting Frances and her team at White Pebble Interiors, you can see the link on the screen below. And Pete, your week, I'm sure, has been busy. I know you've been talking to lots of real estate agents and helping sellers wanting to present their homes.
So we had some presentations during the week with some leading agents in the eastern suburbs. And it was really interesting as you speak to the sales team and I share what we do. It was like, thank goodness there's someone in the marketplace that can actually draw all these things together. See, they don't get paid for running around trying to get quotes.
No.
And so, we did that. We give them direction and a track to run on. And, they're really excited as much as we are. And the one thing I'd have to say about the podcast doing it with Francis the other day was just how hand in glove what we both do. Mine is like the pre-preparation for what Francis takes a homeowner who loves their home and wants to make it luxe.
Yeah.
There we go.
Hey, well, thank you so much for your insights this week, and thanks Tim, who's in production. You don't get to see Tim; he's in the background making sure that everything flows, and he's putting the lower thirds on the bottom of all of the screens. So thanks everyone. We'll be back next week for the ensuite for the master bedroom reveal. I look forward to seeing what happens at that time. And thanks again, Pete and Francis, for your time during the show.
You're welcome. Bye, everyone. Bye.